thing has been a great machine. I've had this machine for about 5 or 6 years now. After I got it for free, it had some issues with it. Around the exhaust is all burnt because it had a valve issue. I've done 2 valve jobs on it before. It requires one every 2 years or the exhaust starts turning cherry red. It's not having that problem right now. I've replaced the carburetor on it. And I also had to rebuild the camshaft because there parts of it were worn out. So this engine's been apart a number of times for me. Earlier this year, I discovered it's having some problems and it's going to be expensive to fix. So I'm just going to use the machine. You never know. These machines were built great back then. This thing is so strong, you could probably set down a light car on the front of this thing without it even breaking. The new ones, if you jumped on the front of them, they just break. This is heavy metal here. But anyways, something is definitely wrong with the clutch on this. I notice it in cold weather. I will hold down the clutch as far as I can. The wheels just won't move. When I first got the thing, it would spin no matter what. But now sometimes you got to give it an extra push to get it to take off. But it's pretty good for a 50-year-old machine. It has a carburetor. Someday maybe I'll get a newer one. But the only thing, I know a newer one's not going to last 50 years. Because as soon as it gets an electrical problem, it probably won't start. This one, the alternator's broken. Those lights don't work. If I try turning it on, something is wrong. It just stalls it. But who needs light when it's snowy? Snow illuminates everything. I don't need lights on it. I never bring it on to actual city streets, sometimes sidewalks. But that's about it. If this thing ever has a failure that would cost more than like $100, I probably would just invest in a newer machine that's fuel injected. Those ones are cool. They have automatic throttles. You don't have to mess with anything. As soon as it detects there's a load in the front of it, the engine revs up. It goes back to idling by itself. But the newer ones are expensive. One this size is probably $1,600, and you won't never have the quality. And the newer ones, they also got rid of this. They don't have this anymore. The new ones have a joystick. This thing goes, it swings back and forth and can lock anywhere. Yeah, because this thing, I've noticed, when I first got the machine, you could shift it really nicely, like it's doing right now. That's because the engine's warmed up, but right now it's 8 degrees or so. When I first started this thing up, it still starts on first pull. For a 50-year-old machine, that is awesome. Starter broke a few years ago, and I'm not going to bother replacing that. But this morning when I got this thing, this would not move out of neutral. So I had to like drag it back and forth because something's locking up inside of the gearbox. But it's been a really good machine. Tecumseh machine. It's actually fun using it. Oops. Gotta fix that. I think I actually did it on purpose. I don't think that moved. Because I didn't want it to get stuck on gravel. I wanted it to go under. I think that may have been intentional on my part. The newer machines aren't solid like this. The new ones are really thin metal. You could probably bend it with your fingers if you really tried. Because this you couldn't even bend if you had some good pliers. These right here, the shear pins it came with, are incredibly strong. Because I have hit rocks with this thing where it's jumped. It's never actually broken one before. Because it has a stronger engine, so it can have stronger shear pins. These are probably original ones. They've never actually broken. And this one, unlike some of the newer machines, it has a bunch of grease ports where you can pump grease into the machine. Only the newer commercial ones have that. So to get even close to this quality, you probably have to buy a commercial one. Unlike the newer ones, I'm sure this one's not very fuel efficient. It's still got a lot of fuel in there now. I use fuel stabilizer. I always use 95 ethanol free. You want higher octane for small engines. You shouldn't be running them on 87 or 85. But this thing, you smell like exhaust after using it. It's a really stinky machine. I change the oil in this about once a year. It's been 2 years since I've changed it. I'm going to do it in the spring. Only reason I'm going 2 years, I'm not using synthetic oil in it. Although I'm probably going to this time to help the engine out. And I only used it twice last year. That's why I skipped the oil change. I don't use this machine very often. Unless we actually get deep snow. If there's like 3 inches, I just pack it. I just drive right over it. Alright, today's snow blowing was pretty tough, and it was all frozen. Yesterday it would have been a slushy mess, but today, since it was frozen, it's pretty clean inside. I don't really have to do anything. I like to use a toilet brush. I make sure all the snow is out of here. It prevents rust. It also prevents, because everything's hot in there now, ice can freeze up in that impeller, and if you have to use it again before the next thaw, you're not going to be able to use the machine unless you have like a space heater or something aimed at this to melt all that stuff out. And this machine, even though it's old, the reason you don't see any actual rust on it, one, I use it a lot, but then again, see all these rusty areas? They're not very rusty because when I got the machine, I went over this with a steel brush, and then I car waxed the whole thing like every year or two, and that really stops rust on lawnmowers and stuff. You see, it's not actually rusty. That's all car wax. It stops it from corroding too badly. So this right here is what I use for the lawnmower and snowblower's fuel. You just have to add a little bit to the 5-gallon container. This right here is regular gasoline. This right here is the ethanol free. Usually I get 93. I have it labeled as 91. I got the diesel here. And up here where it's cold, you gotta add a little bit of this stuff here, whether or not it's red or not. This right here is actually empty. This one is for the chainsaw that has 2-stroke oil in it. Right now I'm going in this culvert to show how an ice dam forms. So how this started out is this ice dam kept building here, with the water slowly trickling over it, making it higher and higher. But we had a warm day of weather, so it was able to erode itself through the bottom. Then it got really cold again, but it's not building back up top because of that gap it eroded. Now the ice is acting like insulation. The cold can't get in there to fill that gap up again. Now inside, further up, at the end of the original ice dam, we got one that's piling more water. And yes, theoretically, this thing would be blocked completely with ice if it stayed cold long enough. But that never happens. It's been cold now for a month, and this is what happened. About half of its diameter, as you can see, is filled in. There we go. Take a look at that. At least half of its diameter is taken up. And you see those little steps. Those steps are incredible. Look at that. Every few days, it makes another one. If I was to walk up there like 6 feet, I would get soaking wet. Because you see right there, 6 feet ahead of me, that water or ice right there is very thin. I could fall right through that. But you see how it's starting to freeze up? It's made another step, probably 10 feet ahead of me. And then after that, there's even further steps. All the way through the culvert, there's little steps. That water up there is having a lot of trouble freezing. That's why the steps are longer than what you have here. The steps keep getting longer and longer because it's warmer. We're deep underground. It's hard for that to freeze up completely. This water will never stop flowing. It's coming from a natural spring in the mountain. It's been below freezing, meaning 32 Fahrenheit, for a solid month. And almost every night is below zero. So this really gets going. It doesn't freeze ever completely. You'd have to get like the entire winter without going above zero, and that's not going to happen. Really incredible, these nice ice dam steps. And you see, these ice, a lot of this stuff just shatters. You see there's another layer down there. There's trickling water underneath me, but it's not much. It's slowed down significantly. The groundwater really stops in cold weather. Look, right there, you got the water right here, because this step isn't very thick. But underneath there, it's flowing pretty slowly, maybe 10, 20 gallons a minute, which is basically nothing. Really awesome. Today we are at Dummer's Pontook Reservoir, checking out all the ice, and there's a ton of it. The water here is not frozen because it's pulling a lot of warm water from the bottom of the reservoir up and over the dam. The ice on the other side is super strong. There's a bunch of pickup trucks parked out on it. Let's go have a look. I'm walking through a lot of snow drifts to get down here. It's pretty deep. Probably got at least 18 inches of snowpack on the ground. But because of strong winds across this open area, it's only a few packed inches across the reservoir. A lot of people parked over there fishing. Got all their huts set up. Remember back in the summertime, tried to fit a kayak through those culverts. Water was like a foot too high though, not enough clearance. Great place to go moose watching in the summertime. Over off to this area, whole bunch of swamps and bogs, bunch of inlets. Also a lot of eagles. Right here in the entryway of the house, I'm installing a motion detector that'll turn the light above the door on when you walk in at night. And here's another toggle switch. It's gonna have a gray plate. I'm not the one who did this crap here. I'm the one who put the metal box in. There was a blue plastic one and I hate working with those, so I put a metal one in. That was done by somebody else. Yep, you see? It's the one I took out. This one wasn't even put in the wall correctly, because you see how close it is up here? The other electrician didn't have enough room to hammer. It was only put in with one nail and it was crooked and it looked like crap from the other side. Just finished putting in a double pole 30 amp disconnect for a water heater, which is required by code. If you can't see the breaker box from the water heater, if it ever needs work, somebody can't turn it on and it'll get somebody electrocuted. That orange wire's my work there. This here, I'm not gonna correct it. Just leave it there. It was done by an idiot. No running board, it's supposed to be up. It should be going through the holes with that one. Again, this was an existing box. I'm using the same wires they had, but with a new box and new switches. This I'm just gonna leave. It's grandfathered. It's not supposed to be like that. It's a finished basement. It's fine to leave it that way. This technically should be inside the wall cavity, going through every single stud. I'm ripping apart this kitchen sink. It's going to be reinstalled with another one. And I'm working inside of here, and I found a miniature fatberg, and it smells so bad. It's up inside the pipe here. Right there. It smells like raw sewage. It's so bad. Just a nasty accumulation. Ew, it's dripping. See that right there? Miniature fatberg inside the pipe. I bet their sink was draining really, really slow. Or that could have been just floating in the water inside the trap and it just turned into a solid when it cools down. That's also a possibility. That's really gross. Look at that. When I took apart this trap, the water was so disgusting. We're gonna poke at that, but not until we get this thing outside. Don't want to make a mess inside here. Alright, today we're going to be replacing the subfloor and putting new cabinets in. Let's get this sink outside. There's nothing wrong with the sink itself. That's going to be recycled. Just given away. Nothing's wrong with the counter either. Just put it on Craigslist for free. That's it. Just wrapped a shopping bag around it. Put tape around the bag so it'll hold on. Now let's carry it out. Alright, got it outside. I must have tripped like 100 times walking through this guy's house. It's like little trails. There's so much stuff in there. Okay, let's get the bag off. Let's see what we got. Let's poke right through that. It smells really bad. But I think that formed by just floating in the water. And the reason it was shaped like a cone is because when you use the water, it wasn't breaking up. That's what I think. Alright, this whole thing is going to be thrown on the side of the street and put on Craigslist, just in case no one comes by and takes it. The seal on the counter wasn't too good. It's good to see there's no mold growing on that, because you could see under the counter there's a lot of mold. That's why this guy has to replace this.